Okay, so welcome everyone to the Economic Development Committee meeting. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, the committee is practicing physical distancing. I am in council chambers, and the rest of councillors are participating electronically, and our chair is here as well, Chair Redmond. In an attempt to speed things up, we have assigned a mover and seconder, and I will read these out. I will then state the result of the vote. I will now call on Tim Baker to conduct our roll call. Oh.
Thank you. Chair Redmond?
Present.
Councillor Erb?
Present.
Councillor Galloway?
Present.
We have regrets from Councillor Harris. Councillor Jaworski?
Here.
Councillor Jowett?
Also here.
Councillor Kiefer?
Here.
Councillor McGarry?
Here.
And we had regrets from Councillor Verbanovic as well.
Okay, so thank you for that. Looking to see if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. And seeing none, I'm going to look to Matthew to do our introductions today. He's got a great bunch of information for us to digest today. So please proceed, Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. So today we wanted to start off with a presentation from Minto Schneider, from the Tourism Marketing Corporation. Earlier this year, Economic Development Committee and Council approved $200,000 from our strategic investment in business supports to support the TARP 2 program, a tourism action recovery program. It was really meant to support the acquisition of personal protective equipment and support with some retrofit programs in the tourism sector. We participated in that in the summer of this year, and along with the area municipalities. So our funding primarily went to the rural townships, and it also supported any overages beyond the area municipal contributions in the cities. So one of the things that we are starting to do with some of the first round of programming is we wanted to report back to committee on how the programs have gone. And so we've asked Minto, as the program's wrapped up now, to come in and talk about the program and share the results of our support towards the TARP 2 program. So that's sort of the context for Minto's presentation today. I'll now turn it over to Minto Schneider to start with their presentation.
Thank you, Matthew, and good morning, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see that. It's really nice to be here, and thank you for the invitation, Matthew, and Chair Jowett. Thank you very much for allowing me to come and talk today. It seems like the first time in 21 months that I've actually had some happy news to report, so it's nice to be here. As Matthew mentioned, we worked with the municipalities and the region and our stakeholders across Waterloo Region and Regional Tourism Office 4 to implement the Tourism Adaptation and Recovery Program Part 2. Just to give you a little background, we were able to get some funding through FedDev to provide support to our industry for the Tourism Adaptation and Recovery Program Part 1. And now you'll know why we call it TARP instead of that very long name. But we launched in late summer 2020 with TARP 1, and we worked with RTO4 and municipal partners, although all the funding came through FedDev. We reviewed grant applications and had $240,000 available to support 56 businesses. And we still are collecting final reports. RTO4 has been doing that. There's 12 left to submit, but their deadline to submit is by the end of this year, and they have until March 2021 to spend the money. So we moved into TARP 2. And as Matthew mentioned, we launched it late last spring, meeting with the cities of Cambridge, Kitchener, Waterloo, the Township of Woolwich, and the region of Waterloo. These were the funding partners, but we also had representation from those that aren't represented on this screen, including Wilmot, Wellesley, and North Dumfries. Everyone was very energetic and enthusiastic about participating in the program. We set up committees to review each of the grant applications for the businesses out of each of the municipalities. At the end of the day, we were able to support 74 businesses. So total, that's 130 businesses from TARP 1 and TARP 2. We have approved funding of just over $352,000. The money has to be spent by December 31st, 2021. And we're expecting, most of the businesses have actually spent the money already. We have a few reports still to receive. There's about 44 outstanding, I think, until January 15th to submit reports to us. And one of the things that prompted this presentation today was that I had mentioned to Matthew that we had a number of shared with us. So I'm going to share some of those with you later in the presentation of what those businesses spent money on. So we were able to support businesses across the region. The breakdown is on the screen in front of you. I can tell you that from the first TARP 1, the support across the region was pretty much even. We didn't see more from any of the municipalities than from other regions. So we tried to make sure that we were supporting businesses in a balanced sort of way. So I want to share a couple of comments with you. Number one, this is from Bob Harris at Chicopee Tube Park in Kitchener. And the thing he was excited about here was that we opened the applications on the 10th of June. Chicopee got their application submission to us by the 11th of June. And, they got their documentation to us by the 11th and submitted all of the information to us by the 14th of June. And by the 16th, we had provided the funding to them that they had applied for. So he was very, very pleased with the speed that we were able to respond to their request. And I'll show you the picture. They did a conveyor lift. They had to change their conveyor lift to allow for physical distancing at Chicopee Tube Park. I can tell you that this is not the most attractive way the funding was spent in the region, but it was very useful for Chicopee, and they were very happy to have the support. Here's another one from Roger Lichty, and I sit with Roger on the Woolwich Economic Recovery Committee, which is how he found out about the program. One of the challenges that we were having when we were getting the news out about the program was that our businesses were being inundated with information about support that was available, about restrictions that were ever changing. And we were trying to keep them, give them a heads up when there was funding support that would be available to them, and kind of spoon feed them in a way so that they weren't missing opportunities. So in this case, Roger was just emailing me, thank you. And if it weren't for us, he wouldn't have known about the funding, and they were able to reopen with distancing and a tent. And I've got a picture to show you of Rural Roots Brewing in Elmira. Here's one from Stephen Karcher. And as many of you are likely aware, Drayton was able to reopen last week at both Cambridge and St. Jacobs. They were unable to apply for much of the funding that was available all during COVID because they're a charitable organization. We've been advocating on their behalf with the province and the federal government to try and make sure that they're eligible for support in the future. But they were very, very pleased to get the little bit of funding that we were able to offer. And Stephen wrote to thank us. And here's a picture of the sneeze guards that they were able to install at the Hamilton Family Theatre in Cambridge, which I'm happy to say now has more people around rather than the pictures where there's nobody. And the last letter I wanted to share with you is from Ken Norman from the Fashion History Museum. Again, they reopened on December the 1st, which is the first time they've been open since COVID reared its ugly head. So we're very happy to have them open and featuring a display that is related to the Unzipped exhibit that's going on in Kitchener. And here, again, he submitted his application or his final report early. And so I don't have finished pictures of what they did at the Fashion History Museum, but hopefully this will entice you to go and visit and see some of Mick's wardrobe that is on display at the Frock On display at the Fashion History Museum. So now I'll show you some pictures from across the region. And these are the pictures that I was inspired by when I talked to Matthew about what a difference this funding made. And we didn't fund anybody more than $5,000. So they were able to put that money to work in a very, in a way that really helped, I think, beautify the region. Here's Waterloo Beer Town. Here is Three Sisters Cultural Center in St. Jacobs. Score Pizza in Waterloo. And what we funded we were trying to fund things that would last. So we were looking at furniture, umbrellas, patio heaters, and in some cases, takeout windows if that was going to help with being able to stay open during COVID and operate during COVID. Our kitchen. Doesn't look like that today, sadly. Kitchener Concordia Club. Copper Branch in Waterloo. The other thing that was great about this funding is it allowed us to connect with restaurants that hadn't been aware of our organization before. And Explore Waterloo Region has been offering a complimentary membership to tourism-related businesses through 2021, and we refunded our membership fees in 2020, and we will be offering complimentary membership again in 2022. So we feel that spreading the news as much as possible to those organizations or businesses that weren't aware of what we can do to help them in the past, this has given us an avenue to get them on board with us. Wooden Boat in Kitchener. St. Jacobs Farmers Market. You can't really see, but there's a sneeze guard installed there. Malt and Barley Public House. And some hotels participated as well. Cambridge, Homewood Suites in Cambridge. Red House in Waterloo. Oh, and I also wanted to explain that most of the business owners that submitted pictures took the pictures themselves. We did not have a professional photographer. I'm sure you probably guessed that by the pictures that you've seen so far, but they were very, very proud of what they were able to do. And that's the last shot I have. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, and I will stop sharing the screen if I can figure out how to do that.
Okay, so let the questions begin. Councillor Kiefer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks, Minto, for that presentation. It was very good, very impressive in terms of helping those businesses. Just a quick question, short question. I noticed, that every municipality except for one was represented in terms of businesses getting help. And I don't know, like Wellesley was the one I noticed wasn't included. So I'm not sure if they didn't have any applicants or what the deal was there.
They did, and the Heidelberg has not submitted their final report yet, but we did.
Oh, I see.
We were able to support them. So I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that Bob McMillan he's erected murals on his patio.
Okay.
And they're fantastic. He hired a local artist to paint them for him. So I'm still waiting for his final report.
Perfect. Really liked it. Yeah, you and Matthew did great work there. Thank you.
Councillor Jaworski.
Well, thank you, and through the chair to Minto. Well, I'm sure these last 18 months have been the most challenging of your career. So thank you for all that you've done, and certainly best wishes. On the investments, it certainly looks like it's a great opportunity for longevity, a great choice of investments. It's amazing when you put the money in the hands of entrepreneurs, how wisely they use it. So that was great to see. I'm just wondering what's sort of the latest that you're hearing amongst your board, your members on COVID pandemic. I'm sure they're we're all hoping for a great 2022, sort of notwithstanding the latest, variant and all that. But what's sort of the theme, the messaging, challenge with hiring? What's sort of the lay of the land, Minto?
Well, thanks for that, Mayor Jaworski. But you're right, hiring is the big challenge, and Charlene's going to talk more about it. I'll leave it to her to talk about that because she has more statistics to back that up. What I'm hearing from the Tourism Industry Association of Canada and the Tourism Association of Ontario are that things are looking more positive. The Omicron variant is, dare I say it, almost a tempest in a teapot, because I think that we've been so careful about insisting on masking, distancing, ventilation, that we are well prepared to meet this one head on. So hopefully people will continue to get out and travel. And we've seen a big influx. If anybody's been to the airport, Flair Airlines is doing a crazy business, as is WestJet. So people do want to get out and travel. The challenge for us is that events are still slow to respond. So business events, meetings, conferences, and sporting events are coming back to a certain extent. We will see some at the end of January, beginning of February in our very own region, which is fantastic. Hockey will be back. But business travel is slow to recover, and we're not seeing that fully recover until 2024, 2025. So, that is a concern. People moving back to their offices is really important for us, especially for the businesses that are located downtown, because restaurants and retail are seeing a slow recovery as well.
Thank you for your response, and thanks for all that you've done for Waterloo Region Tourism, Minto.
One more thing that I should mention, the Tourism Industry Association of Canada held an in-person conference last week. I was only able to attend virtually, sadly, because it was awful seeing all my friends meeting there. But anyway, there were 2 positive cases reported following the conference. And I think this is a testament to meetings and events going ahead in the future, because the communication was very quick that came out after those cases were reported, and everyone that was in person was instructed to isolate until they could be tested, and there have been no more positive tests reported. So when an event is run by a professional organization at a facility that is following all of the right restrictions, I think we're safe to go ahead with meetings and conferences.
Yeah, we're going to have to adapt. There's no doubt about it. There's, the old wash your hands, don't touch your face, wear a mask. I think is going to do us proud with even colds and flus, but get your flu shot.
Yes, I think so too.
See ya.
Chair Redmond.
So Minto, thank you. And thank you for your presentation. I think this is the appropriate place. I really appreciated the first person recounts of the gratitude of people that got the supports. I was really proud of, I'm going by memory now, but I think it was $60,000 that we put aside for counseling for people in the hospitality industry. And to my way of thinking, it really was meeting people where they were and a need that the hospitality industry had expressed real concern over the mental health of their employees. I'm just wondering if you have anything to report on that program.
Well, we didn't get the uptake that we thought we were going to get, but I think the fact that we went out with offers was excellent, and it sent a message that actually the region cares about people's well-being. The COVID was so challenging for many that didn't have an income for the first time, probably ever, when their restaurant or bar was shut down. The sad thing is, and Charlene will report more on this, is that a lot of those people, when their businesses weren't reopened, sought employment in other industries. And that's where we saw a lot of people leaving the hospitality industry because it took so long to come back. So I think things are better because businesses are open more. Some aren't able to open capacity because they just don't have the staff. But hopefully we'll be able to work. We're looking at a long-term plan now to try and get more people back into the industry by speaking at high schools about, hospitality can give you a career. You don't, there's a, look at me, I had a whole career here. It's been a long time. And there are lots of other jobs that some people don't equate to being in hospitality and tourism that are great futures for our younger generations.
As one of the people that was in the audience at the Hamilton Theatre this past Friday, Alex Moustakas did make the point that so many people who are entertainers and professional often supplement that work with jobs in the hospitality industry. And I have to say it was an intersectionality that I hadn't considered, and it sort of was a double whammy for them. So glad to see that business is coming back and people are starting to stream to theaters and restaurants.
Yes, me too.
So Matthew, do you want to vet in now, or do you want to wait till?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to also respond to Chair Redmond's question about the mental health program. That program does run till the end of the calendar year. We did see some demand from other small business sectors, such as personal care service, where there was employees reaching out, asking if they could access some of those services. So we were trying to be very nimble on that, and after it wraps up at the end of this month, we plan to come back to ECDEV committee in January with a report on that program, as well as some of the other programs we announced. So we'll have further information on that for committee in the new year.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Galway.
Well, thanks, Madam Chair. Minto, thanks for the report. The question I had, and maybe you can't answer it, but I'm kind of curious, and it has to do with the pandemic and the mandates that that the province particularly came out with in terms of occupancy and then the QR code checking and so on. And there were some establishments in the hospitality industry that didn't want to go along with some of those things. They decided not to have dine-in and only have takeout because they didn't think it was in their place to check people's personal health information, which I have a lot of difficulty understanding their position. But was that a huge issue? If in fact you know that, or was that really an isolated, more isolated issue?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that there are a couple of different reasons why some may not have offered inside dining, and some was because they didn't have the staff. They offered patio because they didn't have the staff for inside. And fortunately, by the time it was getting too cold to sit on a patio, inside was open as an option for many restaurants. The ones that only offered takeout, some of that was staffing as well. And I know from, and this is really, just from a couple of different people that I spoke to in the industry, that they actually did better offering only takeout during the times when things were changing so quickly. And because restrictions were sometimes on, sometimes off, they'd be open for a few days and then there'd be an outbreak. It made it very difficult for small business to adapt that quickly. Even though they're small businesses, they laid off people. It's hard to get them back sometimes. So it's easier just to offer takeout. And then when things are a little more sure, to open up.
Thanks, Minto. Thanks.
Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to say thanks, Minto and team, for the report and the work that you've done to facilitate this to happen. And it's really encouraging to hear the feedback from the local businesses. And I think you know this percentage better than I do, but 68% of the money remains in the local community from local businesses. And so it's nice to see that uptake, that they're that we're generating business for them, and the money is staying in the community to be circulated amongst other businesses. Is that, am I right with that 68% number?
I'm not sure if you're talking about patrons that are using the facilities.
Well, the money that a small business will earn, 65 to 68% of that money will be respent back in the local community.
I'm not sure about that number, to be honest with you, but
Okay.
but that's likely true. And it's funny because it brought something else to mind when you were asking me that question. And that is, we collected receipts to justify the expenditure that all the businesses did. And almost all the money was spent locally as well for the renovations and purchase of patio tables and that kind of stuff.
That's good to see it continuing to stay in the community. Thank you.
Councillor McGarry.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I'm very interested in seeing some of the of the money spent and some of the report that you've put forward. I wasn't able to go to the Hamilton Family Theatre on the Friday, but took my husband along just as an early Christmas present on the Saturday night. And although, maybe not at full capacity, I was really wondering with some of the venues that have just opened, that would include Fashion History Museum, if you've had any indication about what the initial numbers are for people coming in to see the venue, either from the Hamilton Family Theatre, Fashion History Museum, or some of the other venues besides restaurants. So Minto, I was just wondering if you've been kind of hearing what the occupancy level is like as they open.
Yes, I have. Are you on your computer now? Did you get it to work?
No, I'm on my phone.
Oh, well,
my computer, as I said, I didn't throw it out the window. I was sorely tempted, but I have to actually go into the office and have IT take it over again. So this is my phone.
You're looking good. Yes, anecdotally, I can give you some information. I know a friend of mine came in to go to the Unzipped exhibit on Saturday and couldn't get a ticket for Saturday, had to go on Sunday. So that's a good sign. Another colleague was in the Walper for dinner on Friday and asked the waiter if they were seeing a lot of people from the Unzipped exhibit since they'd opened on the 30th. And the waiter said, we're seeing some, but quite frankly, we're so busy on Friday and Saturday that we don't have a lot of availability for reservations. So that's good news. From Drayton, that they were offering different options for going to the theater, either full capacity or you could choose a performance that was going to have people spaced out. They were seeing much more demand for the spaced out option. Spaced out didn't sound the way I meant it, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean, yeah.
And I haven't talked to Ken at the Fashion History Museum. So I know with them just reopening, hopefully they're seeing a surge of people, but people are willing to get out, and hopefully it will be attracting people from outside the region as well as inside.
Okay, and that's good news. That's really what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
So just to wrap up, Minto, I want to add my thanks to this. I mean, Best Waterloo Region and yourself, and certainly Matthew, who I think he looks under rocks and finds money. He's pretty good at bringing the money to the table, isn't he? But I'm really glad for the programs that we were able to get out there. What I'm most impressed with is how responsive and quickly we were able to, get some really good ideas and execute in a way that was not just innovative, but really practical for the owners and the entrepreneurs. So I don't think I've ever heard the business community so appreciative of the region. So I'm pretty excited about that. So thank you for being part of that team. And thanks, Matthew. I know sometimes as staff, we just expect you to do your job, but you did it, and you hit it out of the park with a great group of folks. So thanks for that. I just have one question for you, Minto. What can we do to support the attraction and retention for the demand that's needed in this industry of people?
That's something that Matthew and I have actually started to talk about. And I think Charlene might have some ideas too. I think that, and I talked to Lucinda Wallace from Economic Development this morning. We are trying to hatch a plan on talent attraction, investment attraction, as well as visitor attraction. So that's something that I was planning to email Matthew about later today, because I think that working together with the Communitech, economic development from each of the municipalities, the universities, and the region will be able to come up with some ideas to work more cohesively. If nothing else good has come out of COVID, it is the collaboration that has developed among all of us, and I think it's a very positive thing.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. So I can trust that you'll continue those collaborations, as will the rest of the partners, to see if we can't do even more work in this post-recovery era for them. So thank you again for your presentation. Okay, Matt, back over to you for your next intro, please.
Thanks, Chair. And continuing along with the theme of talent, we've been working with and talking with a number of community partners about the ongoing talent needs in Waterloo Region, and particularly some of the impacts of the pandemic on talent attraction, retention, and reskilling, and talking about labor force trends. And so one of those partners has been Charlene from the Workforce Planning Board. And as we sort of ramp up for 2022 and look at how we can support talent attraction and retention, we thought it would be good for Charlene to come and share some of the observations from some of the work that she's been doing on labor force trends here in the region and beyond. So with that, I'll turn it over to Charlene.
Thank you, Matthew. Good morning, Chair Jawa and members of Regional Council. I'm really looking forward to talking to you this morning about what's going on. You kind of heard it from Minto. The challenges of attracting and retaining workforce are to affect our businesses and their ability to open, operate, and grow. So I'm going to share a presentation. I'm going to put it here in slideshow mode. But we've really been seeing real difference in how the year has kind of happened. We're looking at the past 11 months. We can see that the workforce numbers locally have improved. Our labor force since January has grown by about 14,000 people. And that's pretty good news because our population is only about 6,000. So it means we're attracting people back. They're finally able to come back in some cases. And we've had about 22,000 more people employed in November than we did in January. So again, that's great news because remember January, we finally went down to lockdown after Christmas and it looked, everybody was, what do we do now? Because we'd already been through lockdown a couple times. So it's good news that we're starting to see that come back. We've also seen unemployment fall by about 8,600 people or 2.8%. This is good news, but it also provides new types of challenges to us. Meaning that we're getting pretty close to full employment. So the people who are left in the market who are actively looking for work have more challenges to overcome in order to get employment and to keep that employment. So things like, training needs, childcare, mental health concerns, housing is a big one I keep hearing again and again. On the flip side, our participation rate is doing pretty well. We're at 70%. That's one of the highest in the province. Guelph's just a little bit below that, and Barrie is pretty much on target. So our economic region does have better participation rate than other areas of the province. So that does bode well for us as a region. But there are challenges built into those numbers. So if we dig a little bit deeper, I'll tell you a bit about some of these challenges we've got. Our first challenge is 15 to 19-year-olds. During the pandemic, we've been seeing that their employment rates have been pretty steady, if not rising. They've actually done really well. But in the past 2 months, their employment numbers have started to fall, and they're not in the labor force numbers have started to rise. So the question really becomes, are they seeking training and deciding to go back to school, or can they not find the roles that they want in the current workforce? Parents also play a role in. Some parents are telling their kids not to work, just wait a little while. But we think that might not be as big a factor now as it was earlier. So this is one issue. Is it a retraining issue or is it an engagement issue? And so we're working with our Employment Ontario partners across the region to kind of figure out what's happening with this group. Our other big issue is that not in the labor force population that I was talking about, 50% of it is 65 and over. So about 75,000 people are not coming back to our labor market. They are probably done. Another 16.2% is 55 to 64. So this is the tail end of our baby boomers. And not to be depressing, but it is the start of our Generation X retirement. So teachers and nurses who are about 55, 56, most of them can take pensions and they can start to remove themselves. And so many of them have been burnt out over the past year that that's starting to happen based on my communications with healthcare and education locally. So we're seeing that beginning Gen X retirement starting to happen in those two industries. Our 29 to 29-year-olds have been hit hard. Everyone else is sitting at like single-digit unemployment rates, and this group is still sitting at double-digit. 20 to 24s are sitting close to 15%, and our 25 to 29s are sitting at a little over 10. So they are still struggling. To put this in perspective, a lot of these people are undertaking their first jobs or their first career jobs. So delaying getting started is going to delay their career and is going to delay their earning potential. So that does have long-term impacts for our region. Women's participation rates have almost returned to pre-pandemic levels. So I think it's 62.2 pre-pandemic, and we're at about 62. So I'm not sure how we can convince more women to undertake work now when they didn't consider it before the pandemic. So this is one area we're really going to have to work at. How do we create the environment where women can return? I mentioned full employment, so I won't touch that one again. But our neighbors are also in the same boat as us. So this means intense competition for workers beyond the region, and it means talent stealing is going to happen. I already know that buses leave Kitchener and Waterloo region daily to carry workers to Guelph, Listowel, and Palmerston to work. So that's already happening. And it's going to continue to get more intense, especially that Perth area, Bruce Gray, because they're at 2.8%. So they pretty much have just about everybody working. So it will become intense. But I'm also an optimist. So there's also opportunity built into our numbers. More 30 to 44-year-olds have returned to the workforce. So if I can say yay for the stabilization of schools, I'd really like to point that out, that I think so many have been able to come back because we have a stable school year. The children are doing pretty well. I do know that there's closures here and there, but overall, parents feel confident that they can return to the workforce, and they are doing so. We have an opportunity to better engage some of our targeted groups. So for right now, the unemployment rate for visible minorities in Canada is 8.1%. So there is talent sitting there just waiting to be engaged and to move into the right roles, and we could do that. The second group is Indigenous men and women. For the past 2 years, their employment rates across Canada have not shifted. We have a really big opportunity to talk with our urban Indigenous population about getting into the workforce, about talking to employers, about taking on those skills, and about creating workforces where Indigenous men and women feel safe and can move forward into those roles. So I think that's a really big opportunity for us in those numbers. And finally, persons with disabilities have been hit really hard over the pandemic, and many did lose their employment. So we have people who have had labor force attachment and they're not employed. So how can we help them get back in? How can we talk to employers about how to bring those people on board? Another big win in our numbers, women 25 to 44 have an employment rate of 76.1%. This is our group of women who's doing well. So how can we get them to stay? I think is our big thing. When we talk about the women who have disengaged, they tend to be seasoned workers, so 55 and older. This group seems to be engaged, and we need to work at keeping them engaged. So we have that opportunity right now. And younger people who are in that not in the labor force population may be looking for support and training to return to the marketplace. And if that's the case, then we have the opportunity that so many of the jobs are short-term or occupational specific training. So there's an opportunity to get them with more skills so they can go back into the market and take advantage of those opportunities that we exist out there. Now, I always like numbers, but I like to tell the story behind the numbers too. So this is a little bit about the workforce shift, because we have looked at research. We've also done some literature reviews, and we've done some of our own research with job seekers to kind of figure out and come to the conclusion that the workforce before the pandemic is not the workforce we have now. They are different. There's a bit of a divide there. So some major shifts in perspective have happened with our workforce. And our workers now have expectations of employers, and they want recruitment and retention to be different. So let me just kind of go over some of those pieces with you that we've seen that are major shifts. Number one, pay attracts people, it does not retain people. Our workforce is pursuing dollars, especially at the bottom level, the lower skilled positions. People will move for 50 cents, a dollar, and so the pay doesn't keep the person, the pay attracts the person. And I think it's important for employers to know that dichotomy. Number two, people leave because of bad bosses. And this is so important because I don't think a lot of employers have really thought about this. The pandemic has caused a lot of people to suddenly be moved into supervisory roles that they weren't ready for. They're feeling a lot of frustration about now suddenly having to be responsible for all these people. They're not properly trained. And sometimes that frustration is shifting to their workers. And then workers in turn are being frustrated because they're trying to go to their supervisor and get guidance from their supervisor, again, not trained, frustrated. So it results in a lot of frustration, some harassment, some loss of dignity, and workers are leaving those situations. Even if the money is good, they're still leaving. They're choosing that mental health and better relationships with their colleagues and their supervisors over the money. So that's why I say pay, retain. Pay attracts, your people retain. And that's the situation that we're seeing. COVID itself has brought a lot of change, and there is a willingness on the part of some people to keep going. So I've been speaking to the small business centers, and they're seeing, they're busy. There's a lot of investment in training programs. They're seeing people asking questions about starting a business, which, great. We love entrepreneurial people because they become our future employers. But there is that happening. And we haven't seen a great resignation like in the US. It either hasn't appeared in the numbers or it's a little bit different potentially. But even if we have 20% of our current labor force or employed people, not even labor force, just our employed people looking for a new job, that's 66,000 people looking for new jobs. That is incredible. That is an incredible amount of change and churn in our local labor market. So even such a small number, let's take 10%, that'd be 33,000. So as a region, there's a lot of potential for change and shift to be happening. And there's a population that's okay with that happening out there. And finally, workers, like I said, have requirements of their employers now. In a lot of industries, the labor market is favoring the worker over the employer. And when you've been in the employer who's kind of led the relationship for 70, 80 years, it can be hard to shift. But these are the things that employees are looking for. They're looking for mental health understanding. They're looking for some form of flexibility. That could be flexibility of hours or days worked, or flexibility of location, which comes into that remote hybrid work model. It also means that people want to be seen as people. They want respect and dignity. Those are the two things that when we ask workers, what are you looking for? That's what they're looking for. They want to be respected. They want to be treated with dignity. And then they want to talk about the openness of policies and processes from recruitment right to retention. They want to know, okay, what are the steps for me to move into that role? What are you paying me? What are my responsibilities? So there is learning on the part of employers about how to market, how to put together, communicate, and implement policies and processes and procedures that maybe they haven't had to think about in the past. And so I just want to stress that for employers, this could be a little bit stressful too, because this is something they haven't had to do in the past. This slide comes courtesy of findyourjob.ca. It's actually from the November Job Demand Report, which just came out this morning. We run this site in partnership with the region, the City of Guelph, Wellington, and Dufferin counties are the partners on that. And it pulls from 33 job boards for the Waterloo region. Every month, there's an interactive dashboard. So this is all from our dashboard that provides details on job postings. It's really easy. If you ever have anyone who you want to look at it, I can gladly teach them how to use the dashboard. So the data we provide is fed by what employers put in their job postings. So in November, there were 13,990 job postings, which is a drop about 500 from October. Seasonal job postings. November can be a little bit smaller than October, so that's in keeping with trend. Only 3,551 postings had wages. And actually that's a drop even from September when it was closer to 4,000. So employers are not sharing wage data. And I just told you, job seekers and workers want that openness about what are you going to pay me? So there's that, our first disconnect here is showing up. The median wage right now in Waterloo region is $19 for an assembler at a manufacturer, which is up from September, which was $18.50. So you can actually start to see that the wages being offered are actually increasing. And this is kind of one of those evidence pieces of that. So to give you some perspective, that means half of the postings are paying minimum wage to $19. It's not a lot of money. And you can see why people are now struggling, because they don't have the dollars to afford housing, for example. The top 10 jobs are about 25% of all postings are the top 10 jobs, which is good news. There's about 424 different occupations that are represented in November. And some of our regions have up to like 40% of their postings being the top 10. So this is telling me on the back end that there's a lot of different employers, and they're hiring different things, and there's diversity. So you can come into the Waterloo market looking for something and probably find it, which is a good news story. And for the second month since findyourjob.ca launched in April 2020, there is an almost even split between jobs that need post-secondary or trades training and jobs that need that short-term, on-the-job, occupation-specific training. Usually it's been dominated by that second type, but for the second month, we're actually seeing it's a split. So good news for us is we can probably retain more of our graduates locally from our post-secondary schools because we know the opportunities are there. We know that over half the opportunities need that sort of training. On the flip side, we also know that if we implement some sort of targeted training locally, that those who are looking to job shift or get in the market have jobs waiting for them outside of it. So that tells us that we're kind of like our employer mix and their demand needs many different types of people, and that those people are probably here or could be attracted here. And my final piece is just to give you an idea of what the job vacancies are looking like. So at the end of March versus the end of June, we did see that job vacancies did rise. And this is for our economic region, which starts at Ayr and goes all the way to like north of Varilya. So we did see that job vacancies did grow. I think in the third quarter, we will see that number rise again. It hasn't been released just yet. But this is one of those pieces where it's going to create additional stressors. So, you know, for those who are left behind and have to deal with that shortage, it is going to create that concern. And you'll start to see why now job seekers are wondering about mental health concerns. My final slide is just to let you know that some employment levels have not recovered as of November 2021. They haven't recovered their pre-pandemic employment. The first set of brackets after the industry is what the deficit is. So you'll see there that wholesale trade, you know, there's still 5,000 people off. Educational services is still about 5,700 off. The second one is how many postings there were in October. I couldn't dig into November's numbers just yet. So they're the October numbers, but that's okay because it's still like, you know, 5,000 deficit in wholesale trade, but there were only 85 postings. So it's going to take a longer potentially for that one to recover versus manufacturing where there were 4,600 is the shortage, the difference, sorry, and there's 293 posted. So that's one. The ones that are in bold are top 10 hiring industries. So manufacturing, wholesale, education, services, accommodation and food. And we may want to watch them, these industries, because some of these industries haven't been able to come back fully, like arts and entertainment and rec, you know, they're still working on it. We heard all about Drayton. We just heard about Drayton. So, you know, they haven't quite been able to hire everybody back yet. And then others have been doing well, but they saw employment rise and then sharply drop off. And my prime example of that is manufacturing. You know, we were pre-pandemic employment levels, and now we're starting to see it falling. So there's something happening there. And others have not been able to attract enough talent despite their attempts, and that is why their numbers lag. So the first thing I want to note about these industries is these are in-person industries. There's little room to work from home for most people. And in some cases, start times and end times are kind of ingrained in them. So you can't get too flexible on showing up half an hour early. Manufacturing, like I said, is one of the industries that saw employment rise. There are fewer postings, but on the flip side, we know that employment agencies have actually been doing a lot of the recruiting for manufacturing lately because manufacturers can't find people. So they're turning and paying employment agencies to do that for them. And those employment agencies are also struggling to find those people. So that's an all-around challenge. Educational services has struggled to find people to come back to work. Custodians and clerical staff have been hard to find, in addition to educational assistants and teachers. The college is having problems finding trades instructors, because a tradesperson can make a lot more money on the job site than sitting at the college teaching students. And in both these cases, the work is part-time or is supply work, and people can find better opportunities elsewhere that are full-time and part-time. And those opportunities can pay the same, if not more, over the course of the year. So there's why education is struggling. Accommodation and food services. In October, they were only 200 people off of their pre-employment or pre-pandemic employment level. And October to November, they lost like 3,200 people. So that creates a deficit of 3,400 in that industry. And that is partly, Minto kind of hinted at, there's inconsistency in the industry about shifts and when you can work and if it's busy or not, and its ability to give people hours to do everything. And people have left that industry out for one of the other ones out there that provides consistency and steady hours. We know that that's what's happening in that sector. 180,000 across Canada left the sector. So that is going to be a real struggle for them as they're trying to bring people in the door and provide more hours. They will probably become more successful because they can't guarantee hours. People are leaving the industry. So it's becoming a bit of a vicious cycle, especially if we go into any sort of shutdown moving forward. And that is everything. That's my contact information. And I want to thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Well, thank you, Charlene. So I do see some hands up, if you'll indulge us for a moment. Councillor Kiefer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Charlene, for that very informative presentation report. I recently read something about self-employed people or self-employment, moving from that to getting hired by companies and organizations rather than going the self-employment route. Just wondering if you could comment on that, Charlene.
Well, when the future work kind of merged and those trends started happening, some of those self-employed people, yes, they're working for someone, but they're still self-employed on the side. So they're like, it's like their side gig is becoming their main gig, but they're still doing a little bit of their side gig. So some of those people who were self-employed could be moving into an employee format and getting those benefits. I do have a friend who did that, and at the same time could still be doing some of what they were doing before beyond that employment model. So there's a little bit of that happening as well. It's a very flexible work environment for a lot of workers right now.
Okay, thanks for the comment.
Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you through the chair to Charlene. Thank you very much for this very enlightening presentation. One area I want to drill down on is you mentioned people with different levels of abilities are underemployed compared to previously, and which is somewhat surprising to me because of the huge investment in technology, as we see here today, that offers remote work ability, and that should have been an enabler. And I'm just wondering if you have any drilled down information on that maybe it's not office work, maybe it's related to in-person work, maybe related to using transit or vehicles to get around. Do you have any further insight on that, Charlene?
There's a few reasons why I don't think that persons with disabilities have been able to access everything. There are some programs like through CCRW, which I can't remember what the acronym stands for. They are doing some work around technology and connecting persons with disabilities. But I do know one of the challenges for that in-work piece that some people want is transit systems are not responsive to their employment needs. Transit systems are much more responsive to appointment needs. So that can be very, very challenging, especially in rural areas. I know for sure when I speak to my rural parts. But sometimes even in cities that can be challenging because you work a shift when you're in person, right? And you need the transit to be available at certain times. You don't want to show up half an hour early because what do you do? And that piece can emerge as well. But I think one of the biggest challenges still is employers not seeing the talent pool that exists and not sharing how to access it. We're still hearing, despite 20 months of where people could work at home, but how do I do it if, but how much is that going to cost me? And I think that is still one of the challenges out there. The Making Sense of Abilities Coalition locally is still trying to make employers aware that most of those accommodations are not very big. They tend to be less than $500, if that. There are lots of coaching models out there. And I'm not sure even now through the pandemic that employers are aware of all those pieces like they could be.
Oh, good to know. Thank you for that.
Councillor Galway.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Charlene, for the report. I'm curious about, again, I'm going to go back to vaccinations, and to what extent, if any, if you're aware of, or even anecdotal evidence, that requiring vaccinations actually assists in the hiring process, in the attraction, and maybe even in the retaining of individuals, because we have heard, of course, anecdotally in some industries, healthcare being one of them, that people have left over these mandates. But on the other hand, it actually often could be an attraction. And we saw that years ago on another health-related matter when we put into place the smoking bylaw. Now, that had to do with the hospitality industry particularly, but one of the benefits of that were that not only did more customers come out because of the smoking bylaw and the healthier environment, but it was easier for them to hire people to work in a smoke-free environment. So I'm wondering if there's any parallels to the COVID situation, if in fact, I know there are businesses that will now only hire vaccinated people, but they may not, of course, have mandated vaccinations for existing employees. So I'm just wondering if there's any evidence one way or the other in that regard. You may not have.
Anecdotally, I'll give you some anecdotal, Councillor. So we have been speaking to some of the groups that do work with job seekers, and there's two groups. There's those who will only go to an employer who requires it, and there will groups who do not want to go to an employer who mandates it. So we're kind of, if I had to, thinking about what my Employment Ontario partners have told me, more want to see that testing or required vaccinations are in place. That seems to be what most people want, but there is a small group that wants to know that they can go to any employer and it's not going to be an issue. The testing seems to be okay. You know, if I can't vaccinate, could I test in? And that, for most people, seems to be all right with them. The one area that I think it's going to affect very adversely is our transportation industry. With the US deciding that everyone who comes in now needs a vaccination, I have heard rumors between 15 to 20% of truck drivers will leave and will become Canada only. And that could actually create real big issues with the supply chain, and it would create issues with retail, accommodation and food, construction, manufacturing, all of those that kind of move goods. So that is one industry that could create a snowball effect across our economy, because they're just drivers who, they're independent minded is the best way to put it. So they're making their own decisions. And if they decide not to and decide to go to in Canada only, it could cause some really big concerns for our employers locally.
Okay. Councillor McGarry.
Thank you, through your chair. And Charlene, I was really actually more optimistic after seeing this this presentation, but also knowing that we have some challenges ahead to resolve some of the workforce issues. It's certainly surprising, I think, to some of us on the call today to see the flip from what we were sort of envisioning as we came out of the pandemic. My question was really focused around some of the women in the workforce issues. We have certainly some challenges from women getting into the workforce because of the cost of childcare. So I know there's still some ongoing negotiations right now between the province of Ontario in taking advantage of the $10 a day childcare that the federal government is trying to implement across Canada. So, as I said, the numbers today show that a lot of the women have come back to the workforce, but do you see any changes that may occur if indeed at some point in the future it go to a $10 a day childcare issue? Thank you.
I'm seeing some potential that if we do go to that $10 an hour, I think my big concern is how are the childcare operators going to operate? Because we still need the ECEs to function and ECE assistants, and those tend to be female dominated as well. So it could bring some people back who maybe were thinking that childcare is their big issue. They don't want to work a job just to pay for childcare. So if we knew that they could free up dollars to do other things, I could see some women choosing to come back. But there are some women where if the model in the US is followed, they've left because it creates a better family. And those women were not, $10 a day for childcare is not going to bring them back. So I think it just becomes this very individualized thought process. The thing about women coming back is it looks like the she session they were talking about in Waterloo region may be resolving itself. And so that's a bonus on that side of it all. So I'm not sure how that $10 will affect long term.
Thank you. Yeah, no, all good points that you've raised. And it's a bit puzzling too as we go through it in a good way. As I said, it's good to see that as many women as you are indicating have actually returned to the workforce. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Charlene, I really want to thank you for a very focused, really enlightening presentation. I know that through this pandemic there have been, and I specifically when you were talking about the 55 to 64 year age bracket about employment, lots of people who are nurses and teachers actually came back into the workforce through the pandemic because they recognized a need and they came in. Are those stats captured in the ones that you provided with us?
So we did see that jump back into the workforce. Like you could see that physical rise as that pandemic started, that 55 to 64, that, its numbers were smaller on that not in the labor force size. But I have seen over the past few months that I've seen it to, that not in the labor force number in that age group start to rise. So it had started to fall and now we can start to see it rise again. So that's why I was wondering if there was that burnout. And when I did speak to health education, they say, we are seeing that in our 55-year-old teachers and nurses just kind of saying, you know what, I can take my pension, I can be done. So it's a little bit of anecdotal to back some of that number.
And I really did appreciate your talking about this not being the great resignation because it's also been depicted for me, it's more of the great migration as people leave one job to different jobs. So thank you very much for this snapshot.
You're welcome.
Well, Charlene, I just love labor economic conversations. So thank you very much. We always knew this day was going to come where we'd see the shift in the boomers, and we know that COVID certainly exacerbated some of those concerns. But yeah, it's nice to see them working themselves out and some of the great solutions that have come to the table, like micro skill opportunities and some other things so that we can respond more quickly and adapt to what the what the workforce needs to be to fill that gap. So the big question I have for you is similar to the one for Minto. It's like, well, what can our regional government do to support fulfilling that gap between supply and demand? And so I know that sometimes that's skill match, but is there something else we can do to perpetuate the right ecosystem to support that?
I think one of the things that could be done is we just need to see our employers rethink their ideas. So I'm not sure how the region fits in on that one, I'll be honest. But supporting anything that's going to educate our employers about this shift is probably the best thing to do. Saying, we've seen this, we agree with it, here's how you can do it a little bit differently, and to get that messaging across, because I think that in order for us to come out of this, it is going to require a little bit of a shift on the part of employers locally. And so just having those conversations with employers helps consistently. And I've had my few, and they've been interesting, I'll be honest, to kind of talk to them about that. But to hear them come out and say, you know what, that kind of makes sense given what my kids have told me. And then that's the light bulb moment, right? So I think we just need employers to get some of those light bulb moments any way they can.
Yeah, and I think there's some real heeding of the advice that you give in that people don't leave for money, they come for money. They leave because they have a bad boss, and it's usually the immediate boss. So you can be the greatest entrepreneur in the world or the greatest CEO, but that person that is managing the day in and day out operational or even strategic activity of the human work plays a significant role in the success of keeping, attracting, and retaining good employees. So I appreciate that messaging as well, because it's something we know is really critical going forward. Mm-hmm. So thanks, Charlene. Another great presentation. Much appreciated today. Over to you, Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. So the next item on the agenda is a report that should be in front of you regarding a PPE and information program for the arts and culture sector. As we continue to look at how what options are available to support small businesses, entrepreneurs, and different sectors here that are impacted by the pandemic, one of the areas that we've been working with our cultural services team on is how do we support the arts and culture sector here, and look at it from the perspective of, most of them are all, small businesses really, or entrepreneurs. And so how do we look at what opportunities are available now? What are their needs right now? And what are their needs going to be in the coming year? One of the things that we've, Minto earlier talked about the tourism program that the region and area municipalities supported. That seems to be an ongoing need for a number of small and medium-sized businesses, but specifically in the arts and culture sector. And so one of the things that we've been looking at is how do we take elements of that program that we supported, and how do we customize that for artists here in our community? The need for PPE continues. There's an additional cost with it. We've built a bit of an infrastructure from some of the programming that we've already delivered here in the region through that other program, through the generous donations of a number of companies here in the region. We've been able to accept some PPE, ranging from face masks to sanitary wipes to hand sanitizer, and some of these donations have been significant. Through our COVID Safe Ambassador program, for example, we've been distributing masks that Eclipse Automation had generously donated to us to really help other small businesses through the pandemic. And so with this inventory, we would take some of this inventory and specifically create a program for the arts and culture sector, as well as continued information. We've been assembling information for small businesses and updating that information as we see changes in provincial regulation or directives that are issued. And we do our best to get that out to small businesses here in partnership with a number of stakeholders across the community. So we've been working on this first program for the arts and culture sector. And I'll actually just pause for a minute and turn it over to my colleague, Helen Marie Russell, to sort of speak to some of the things she's been hearing as she's been working with the arts and culture sector here in Waterloo region.
Great. Thanks very much, Matthew. I think going back again to Minto's presentation, that it's only just now that a lot of the live in-person gathering performance type things are actually happening again. So we heard that the Fashion History Museum, Drayton Entertainment, and also the KW Symphony are only just now this month beginning to have live performances in person indoors again. So that's when now is that opportunity for us to start providing them with this, or expanding the program that's already happened within the region to provide PPE and more information as the sector gets back up and running again. We also know that this sector has been extremely hard hit. They were pulled out in the regulations, specifically museums, theaters, performance venues, festivals, etc. were always, as public health regulations changed, they were actually pulled out. So they were hit pretty hard throughout the pandemic for revenue generation, and being able to support them as they begin to recover. Even things like rehearsals and things like that were having to be done in a different way. It's also worth noting how creative our sector has been in the region throughout the pandemic in delivering virtual programming, remaining connected with their communities, finding ways for the community to connect with locally produced cultural opportunities. But now, as we move back into the in-person situation, there's an opportunity for us to be able to support them with PPE.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. So, really what we're trying to do is just, again, as Helen said, they're just customized and kits of PPE and information, make that available to the arts and culture sector. We will make sure that we're working on registration forms. So artists throughout the community will be able to email in and request these packages of PPE and information, and then we will organize pickup times for these folks. And so we're going to start right now with some space at our Pine Bush, at the vaccination center on Pine Bush in Cambridge as our first pickup point, and that is where we are currently administering our COVID Safe Ambassador program from. So we'll also leverage that site, and then we'll look at the demand across the region. And if there is a need to open up other delivery sites, we'll also work with partners on making sure that it's easily available to whoever needs it across the whole of Waterloo region.
Wow, so we really did well with some of those supplies, and you've been able to expand the programming beyond what we thought we could. So well done, both of you, especially because we do know that the arts and culture are in need of some support in that way. So good, great news. Go ahead, Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you. Through the chair to either one of you, a little bit off topic, but since you brought it up with respect to COVID safe and quick screening, I'm thinking of, I just wanted to ensure that I think that the quick screening kits are available to all businesses. I just wanted to confirm that if we knew whether the arts and culture sector essentially qualify for those as businesses or independent operators, that they would have access to those as well.
Through the chair, from what I understand, Councillor Jaworski, yes, as small business owners, they would be artists would be eligible for those screening kits where they're available, and I haven't heard anything as to why they wouldn't be. So, and I think I've actually heard some take advantage of that program.
Go ahead, Helen.
Thanks. And I think that it may be worth making sure that as we launch this program, that's made explicit to those stakeholders as well, that these things are available to them. This is a way for us to be able to reach out and ensure that they see themselves as part of those programs that we've already got in place that can support them.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Helen.
I know we have fun like that all the time, don't we, Helen? Okay, so I guess now, Matthew, you're looking for us to accept your report and the motion that follows it with regard to the recommendation here is asking for us to continue with $50,000 to be funded through the strategic investment in business supports to support the program costs that you've described, correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. So I'm looking to this group for a motion, please. Thank you, Councillor McGarry, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Kiefer. All of those in favor, use your buttons. That's carried. And there is no information. There is no other business. I'm looking to this group just in case. Oh, Councillor, sorry, Chair Redmond, you've got. Okay, all good. All right, just want to make sure. Okay, so now we are looking for a motion to adjourn our meeting, our very comprehensive and interesting meeting. Thank you, Councillor Galway, seconded by Councillor Erb. All of those in favor, use your buttons. And that's carried. Thanks, everybody. Well done. Well done, Matthew.